Hello and welcome. I'm Corey Kell, creator of FlatEarthIntel.com, and today I'm going to give a presentation on some of the big questions you may ask. And this is a two-part video presentation. This is part one of two parts. And basically, we'll talk about some of the big questions that you may have, and also were some of the questions I kind of had when I looked at the shape of the Earth. With that, let's get started. Now, first question, why does it matter? What's the big deal with regards to the shape of the Earth, And I think it's probably something a lot of people ask, one of the first questions they ask. And really, when we look at this, we have to kind of look at two roads we can travel down. The first being the cosmic accident, the Big Bang Theory. In other words, this is mainstream science theory. In other words, we're taught in our education system that, mainstream education system, that the Earth and the universe was created in a Big Bang, and then developed. The Earth developed after that Big Bang. All the galaxies and the sun and the planets that revolve around our sun in our solar system were created from this. And then, as time went on, life formed on this planet through the theory of evolution. So those theory of evolution and Big Bang Theory, they're tied together at the hip. Those two are tied together at the hip. The other road traveled is the intelligent design by a creator, as told to us in the Bible. In other words, man and the earth and the heavens, the animals, the fishes in the sea and in the lakes and the water, we're all, and the birds, we're all created by a creator who intelligently designed everything, all that we are and all that we see around this earth. Those are the two roads. And if we look back in history kind of tells us or shows us that for those of us who believe in the flat earth model, that we're not alone. Many of the other civilizations also believed in the flat earth model. The Egyptians, the Norse, the Hindu, the Mayans, the Inca, the Navajo, the Hebrew, they all, when they looked up in that sky, they pictured a dome over us, the heavens over us. Again, these are just some of the civilizations that have a flat earth cosmology. Then, of course, we have the Nicholas Copernicus, about 300 years or so ago, introduces the globe model recently, basically in history. So we get these images of Earth as shown to us by NASA. And I kind of leave that for the individual. It's up to the individual, I think, to decide whether or not they believe these images as we're shown. But again, I think we have to use our critical thinking skills and kind of look at it, and not just accept something. If somebody shows us an image or a video, we have to kind of analyze it and kind of take a look at if we believe what we're seeing. So we have to be very careful about that. The cosmic accident, the first road I talked about, this is the mainstream science model. And really, when we talk about the globe here, this corresponds with the Big Bang Theory. This is what we're talking about. That's this model. And this directly ties into when we talk about the theory of evolution. First the globe, then the animals, and man evolved through this theory. And again, this is mainstream science, and I see a lot of some folks trying to tie the globe into the Bible. This is the wrong model for the wrong cosmology. The biblical cosmology is very definitive. If you're a creator, and I just kind of I talk to some people about it, I say, look, if you're a creator and you're creating a model, you're going to create an Earth. You're not going to have an Earth with an ever-expanding. You have no control over that. And you've got a lot of spinning and moving pieces in this model. Very inefficient model. A creator who's intelligently and is going to design a model is going to create something like this, a flat Earth model, where you have some control, where you can monitor your civilization as they advance, as they develop, as they mature, in their ages, and you can watch it. You can watch that civilization with a sense of pride, or with a sense of sorrow, as if this, when the civilization does something massively wrong. We look at all the wars and some of the things that human beings are capable of, genocide and other things that go on this earth. Again, this model fits with the biblical cosmology, the flat earth model. These models fit very well. The orbital mechanics within it work. The sun and moon, the orbiting over the top of the flat earth, and then of course we have the firmament with the stars and the heaven above, a very close-in system. It just works. Question number 2. What effects would occur on human civilization with the cosmology change? Once we identify, hey, we're in something else here. We're not on that other cosmology we're brought up with. The effects would be massive effects if they're not slow walked. If you don't slow walk the change, which I think is occurring right now. I think we're being slow walked through the change. Stock market, of course, you see how the volatile markets can be, would be huge, especially when you look at aerospace industry, and you're talking about space industry, and then people asking the questions, oh wait, you're firing those rockets up and there's no space, we're in an enclosed system or a closed-in system. What are you doing with those rockets you say you're spending all that money on and going to all these other places? Again, that's a huge problem. Education system would have to be entirely revamped because you're taught basically one mainstream science, and it turns out that you're living in a terrarium. That would be a huge issue for the education system, because then you have all these people that have all these these prestigious awards and documents hanging on their wall, and then all of a sudden you have them sitting there with mud on their face. It's like, well, nobody really wants to see that. That's nobody really wants to see that. And again, I've had some folks from science reach out to me and talk about the ostracization. That's a tongue twister. Within the system, and he said, he emailed me and messaged me and talked about, he was worked as at a college out in California, and he's had some papers published. He's been published, and he said, I just can't come out because it's just too hard. There's too much resistance out there against it. Doesn't want to be targeted, and I don't blame him. There's a time and a place for it. So eventually, change will occur. Science, all the sciences, all the ologies would have to change. That now, you're not living on one model. You're actually living in a terrarium. That changes things. It's been created, but again, animals are animals, plants are plants, and humans are humans. So again, we're still the same. Religion, you're giving religion power basically over science. That probably might not go over too good. Again, science sitting there with mud on their face, and religion going, aha, we told you so. That might not go over too well. Directly leads into power, control, and conditioning. Talk a little bit about that. The Y factors, there's plenty of them. Money, power, greed. These are all human factors. They can be human attributes. As far as how humans act towards money, power, corruption, absolute power, can be developed and turn people into corrupt ways. Greed, centers of influence, military, media, business, schools, religion, government. These are institutions. They all have institutional viability. It's layered. That entire center of influence, institutional, is layered, and it's called institutional viability. Power, control, and extension of authority. It's there. It's definitive. The need for money. We need money to survive in this world. It's basically for comfort. Some people desiring more comfort than others. That's very simple. Give and take. Greed. There's never enough. Some people wanting more of everything. And that's how you see some people are more motivated, especially like in business. Look at the people that have that are very successful. Again, there's certain motivation, but plenty of Y factors. And the evolution and conditioning mediums, talking about first medium, one of the first mediums, radio. Remember, the War of the Worlds came out on the radio and kind of shocked the U.S. You know, that big incident that happened with War of the Worlds. Again, they're very, mediums are very powerful. Then television. I can remember when I got my first color television in our family. This was in the late 60s, I think, early 70s. It was actually, I was on a swivel. I remember that was so cool. Went from black and white to color. It was a Zenith TV. I remember that. It was pretty neat. And computers followed up with that with the internet. Basically, far more information individuals were exposed to. So much more intense, and then of course smartphones. That information medium becoming smaller, more compact, so you're able to carry it around with you 24/7. And don't believe me, look at some of the ways some of the people, if you're walking in the day, look at some people if you're going through a mall or going downtown or shopping or anywhere at the supermarket or a gas station, you'll see people with their face in their cell phone, always looking at their cell phone. Again, that conditioning right there, right in your face. The smart chip, of course, the next technology that came out in around 2020, actually being put in human beings. You know, that Bible talks about that a little bit, and that technology. But what's next? You know, we talk about, and I talk about this in kind of talking about simulation theory, you know, the God and the God chip, the pineal gland. And now people ask me, and I had one guy talk to me. I said, "Well, you know what the pineal gland is?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, it's within us. I call it the God chip." And I said, you know, I asked him. I said, "Do you know what pineal means?" And he said, "No." And he said, it means the face of God. And you look at these smart chips; they have the face of they have the name of the Creator. Hint, hint. You know, the pineal gland, that smart chip, only it's organic, it's within us. It's how God communicates through us, our intuition, you know, kind of our sixth sense, right and wrong. Again, it's there, and it's littered throughout the Bible. I look at the Cain and Abel story. I talked to him about the Cain and Abel. I said, "Well, how do you think God knew Cain killed Abel?" I said, "That server went offline. That pineal gland cut out." It's like, "Oh, God looking at us, something's wrong with Abel, not responding." You know, that separation. You know, when you talk about pairing, you know, that the human body with the soul. You know, you come into this world. That's like Bluetooth pairing. But that God chip, God can monitor us, and it can also induce programming. It's in the Bible there. You look at the languages, you know, the Tower of Babel story with all the different languages all of a sudden, you know, Nimrod wanting to come up and meet with God. Well, you know, God knew that wasn't going to be a tea party with tea and crumpets. You know, Nimrod was going up there to take God out. God kind of sensed that and was like, "No, that's not going to happen." So God mixes up the languages. And again, the story with Jacob, you know, who has to learn these 70 different languages when he's sold into Egypt, and he becomes the second most powerful man in Egypt. He has to learn 70 languages basically overnight, so God sends an angel down. It does it through the pineal gland. Program, language, very, very effective, very, very efficient from a creator, intelligently designed. It's there, it's littered throughout the Bible. Even in mammals, when the animals go 2 by 2 into the ark, animals have a pineal gland. It's very, very, it's littered throughout the Bible. Human conditioning, be aware of its presence. It's direct and indirect. In other words, it's directly focused at you, and it can be indirectly in messages and what we see. And it's very progressive. We're exposed to it 24/7, day in, day and night. Utilizes the mainstream media. That's just all over. Education, it's in our education at all levels. And again, we're talking about these several centers of influence. You know, this conditioning, we're conditioned at a very young age. We're introduced to the globe model for the first 12 years of our educational life. We see that globe in our classroom. So that's huge conditioning. And then, of course, they sprinkle in with some of their theory along with this principle and application in the subject matter. So again, that conditioning, we're exposed at a very young age. Compartmentalization and control. This is kind of a 101 process. Basically, it's how you can control information and basically who else needs to know. And this is within military, defense, contracting, business, and industry. There's an order and a process to keeping control and performance measures in place. Sometimes keeping a secret isn't as hard as you think when you break it down, and it really isn't. Do some secrets get out? Yeah, but sometimes I think it's intentional. So, but if you compartmentalize things and control things, yeah, you can keep things a secret if you want. Not so hard. Question 3, what accountability issues are there with the heliocentric model? Kind of what I looked at, and I was asked this by a professor of science. What globe proofs and that? Oh, vertical angle. Accountability. If you're going to perform a test, well, let's look at vertical angle using the sun. And that kind of surprised him because I don't think he was ready for that. Nicholas Copernicus, creates the heliocentric model a couple hundred years ago, and science comes through, and they start doing experiments. People start doing experiments on the shape of the Earth. Bedford-Ludlow experiment, that shows that Earth isn't curved; it's basically flat. Michelson-Morley experiment, 1887, was a big one, and this one, science tried to prove that the Earth was moving, and it failed. It showed a null experiment, and even Einstein admits it. It's a huge problem. And Einstein admitted it. And Einstein came out with the theory of relativity in 1905 and then another theory of relativity in 1915. Well, you look at these dates, they come shortly after these experiments are done. Why? Because science tried to prove it, and it failed. It failed big time. George Sagnac, again, they tried to bring, Einstein talked about the ether, and then that wasn't there, and Sagnac does an experiment and says, no, the ether's there. And just crushes Einstein again, and it's like, oh man, Einstein just shaking his head. But the one who saw what was going on, all the shenanigans, Nikola Tesla, he saw what was going on. And he called out the heliocentrists, and he said, hey, scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments. And he said, hey, they wander off through these equations after equations. They eventually build a structure which has no relationship to reality. In other words, he's talking about the sky and the globe. They tried to make it mathematics, and it's just not math. It's made for ambience, beauty. It's a clock. It's a time-aged clock, and that's what the whole system is above us, the sky above us. Again, the signs of the zodiac, and then, of course, science finally kind of gives up, and they said, you know what? We're going to have science fiction. we're going to mix in science fiction with science. A hint. You have a 2-letter word that includes science. If you can't get your experiments to show something, then you pour in some fiction. We'll get it to work one way or the other. And along comes Hugo Gernsback and helps them out in 1926 in the advent of science fiction. And they needed it because the globe was just failing massively. Bedford-Ludlow experiment, just a short video review on this. It's basically Robotham. He actually wrote a book, Earth is Not a Globe, so if you haven't seen it or if you haven't read it. It's a pretty good document. I think it's also under terra firma, but he basically does a test along a 6-mile canal in Cambridge, United Kingdom, and basically shows the Earth is flat, not a globe. It does a lot of geometry, early geometry. Michelson-Morley was the big one. That's the crusher to heliocentrism. Basically showed that the Earth wasn't moving. Science did it. They did their own experiment trying to validate it, but it resulted in a null effect, and that was catastrophic. It's like they kind of pulled the plug on heliocentrism. And then Einstein, they called him in and said, well, he talks about this, and if you read through this, and it basically says, soon I came to the conclusion of our idea about the motion of the Earth with respect to the ether is incorrect. If we admit Michelson's null effect, like dancing around science fiction right there. This first path which led me to the special theory of relativity. Since that, I've come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment. So what he's saying is, well, the Earth is moving, you just can't see it moving, so don't believe it. Gee, I wonder if we applied that same methodology to some of the images NASA shows us from space. So we shouldn't believe what we see? Is that what you're telling us? That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Though the Earth is revolving around the sun. Again, Einstein simply removed the existence of the ether, but was later disproved by another scientist, George Sagnac. And this experiment proved the existence of ether, or the fringes, that came out in his experiment. So that was huge. And again, just crushed Einstein again twice. That was a huge problem. So accountability, all kinds of issues with heliocentrism. Question 4, does space exist, meaning outer space? And this outer space really only works with one model, and we're talking about the heliocentric model, because it needs these vast distances. And here you have the elliptic, the Earth's elliptic, and it travels around our sun. This travels around about 67,000 miles an hour around this elliptical orbit. But it maintains the sun to Earth relationship always at 90 degrees and at the equinox and then in the summer. You just have summer here in the southern hemisphere right here, and then summer in the northern hemisphere here. But it always maintains the 90 degree, and that's another huge problem. But you need these vast distances for this model to actually work. Its orbital mechanics fails once you test it, but it needs those vast distances. Why? Because you have the Big Bang Theory, the universe, the ever expanding, huge vast distances. We're supposed to be traveling through the universe at between 500 and 600,000 miles an hour. Again, that's a lot of motion, a lot of speed, and a lot of movement, and a lot of distance. The Milky Way is shown in the night sky. The ancients believed this was a great rift in the dome, which was believed from where a great flood poured down on the earth as the heavens opened up. We look at that beautiful sight in the eye, sight in the sky. The Milky Way is truly a gorgeous sight at night, just beautiful. And the night sky provides ambience beauty for us humans to gaze and wonder into the lighted heavens. And it's just a clock, along with there's an astrology to it. Again, very telling for the signs and the seasons. A very accurate clock as well. When we talk about the flat Earth model, it's a very close-in system. So it's very close to us. So the sun and the moon, the sun being 3,000 to 4,000 miles, the moon being about 300 or 400 miles above Earth. Again, very close, very localized system. If you're a creator and you're creating something like that, that's what you want. That's how you design it. Something that you can kind of control and monitor your civilization as it develops and grows. The stars, when we look at the stars, there's this space at these vast distances, or they say they're at, they don't really look like the stars we're told in the heliocentric model. They're luminaries, but what are they? I don't know. You look at these objects with the advent of HD technology and digital technology, it's really changed the game. And it exposes heliocentrism, the weaknesses in the heliocentric entire system. So again, these definitely don't look like suns. They look like something else, but I don't know, but they don't look like suns, what we're showing in the heliocentric model. Question number 5. What problem does the vacuum of outer space represent? And that's a huge problem. Where does it begin and where does it end? Extreme altitude, the vacuum effect zone in extreme altitude, where there's no atmosphere to push off of a steer, making rockets basically inoperable, beyond this area. And again, rockets going up the farthest, and then you have aviation zone, and then helicopters. These all have limitations. Limits, as to their operating zone. Of course, they tell us that the ISS is up here. Again, that vacuum of space that creates a problem. Because why? Because they say, well, I've heard the use of, well, it's just a gradient. Vacuum doesn't care about a gradient. Vacuum will crush a gradient in a heartbeat. If you look at experiments done on rail cars and tanker cars, how they destroy them using a vacuum, it's very violent and very rapid and very shocking, the effect. You can find it online. Just type in vacuum on a rail car or a tanker car, how they destroy them. It's very violent and very rapid. But again, vacuum doesn't care about a gradient. Vacuum is very heavy and very forceful. Again, extremely powerful. As I said, I've seen experiments done on these small little vacuum chambers they build, and then kudos to these people trying to look at, trying to develop these or do experiments on these. That's good. People are out there looking for answers, but when you build a small vacuum chamber and you put a rocket engine to see if it operates and see if it push, you've basically put in an artificial barrier to push this rocket. Once you get it started, some do, some don't. It has the wall to push off of. So in space, you don't have that. There's nothing to push off against it. And once you get that, you've changed the physics of that vacuum. It changes. So once you get that ignition or thrust, if you actually get it to work, some have, some do, some don't. It's a failed experiment from start to close, and whether or not you get that rocket to move or you get to push it off, because it doesn't really tell us what would happen in an immense vacuum of space, where this doesn't have any, the rocket doesn't have anything to push off of, so it doesn't go anywhere. You need something to push off. It's kind of like if you were sitting in a chair and you had another person standing and they say, okay, pick up your feet, now walk towards me, come towards me in the chair, and then you're spinning your legs around in circles, not pushing off the floor. You need to push off that floor to move. So I did that to an individual in Afghanistan, because I told myself, well, how's a rocket work in space if it doesn't have anything to push off? And I used that example. He's like, I never thought of that. So again, that's a huge problem. This concludes part 1 of 2 parts, and we will begin part 2 shortly. I'm Corey Kell, creator of FlatEarthIntel.com. Thanks for watching.